A very light pencil line is all you need for a sketch. You don't want too much detail, and then you just go straight in with the paint. So I'm using my Pentalic journal and a nice sable to get the detail. And I'm still starting with two colors, the quinacridone rust and the cobalt blue, just like the tufted titmouse I painted last week. There's going to be some variation, but these are little gray songbirds, so they're very, very similar. I'm keeping the strokes light and building it up in layers, and that'll give me that. The chickadee is a little sleeker than the tufted titmouse. The feathers aren't quite so fluffy. So some quinacridone rust with a tiny bit of nickel azo yellow mixed in. And I'm not sure whether this is a Carolina chickadee or a black-capped chickadee. I honestly can't tell the difference unless they're side by side. So we're both singing at the same time. So I know we have both in our yard, so I can't tell you exactly which it is. All right, so I'm starting with a cobalt blue because I want the undersheen. I'm going to do the dark of the head, and I want underneath that where I kind of pull out a little bit of paint, I want that to have a blue highlight. That's a really good, it's not as harsh as a bright white. Here I'm using quinacridone rust and ultramarine blue, still the same subtle darks. I'm using a couple more colors in this one just because the chickadee's black cap is very, very dark, and it also has a little bit touch of gold on the underneath, so that little touch of nickel azo yellow. All the sunflower seeds need is a suggestion. That's all it is it's a suggestion of, hey, there's some seeds in there, and that's it. It's amazing how many takers you get with the sunflower seeds too. Much better odds than the birdseed. All right, so I'm doing a splattered background. I'm being very careful to, I know it splatter, it looks like you're completely free and loose and crazy, but I was very careful to put some behind the head where it's the black cap because I want a little less contrast from the paper and the edge of the cap of the chickadee, and I want more contrast in the eye because that's where you go. So I've let this dry completely. I really like doing a minimum of 2 washes, but same rules as last week. If you only have time for one, you can finish one later. And you can also do a little bit less crazy on the splattering or wait on the splattering to the end, and you don't have to wait for it to dry. So there's all kinds of options here. So getting the dark is actually going to take a couple layers for that black color. You could go in with some ink and scribble a bit. And the eye, so I'm going to do a couple layers on the black cap, and the eye is actually really tricky on this. Any animal that is basically has the black feathers, or my dog has where you can hardly see his eye, the black fur and black eye, that is really hard to paint and have it look good. You have to add a little bit more white sparkle than it actually has in it to make it contrast nicely. Otherwise, there's not enough contrast in it. The eye from a distance will just blur in with the black of the feathers. So add the extra sparkle if there's a dark eye on a bird next to dark feathers. So I'm building this up in layers. I used a slight touch of some Van Dyke brown in this. And but I'm laying the blues and the background colors really show through. It matters what you paint underneath just as much as your final layer. So plan it out in your head and then play. A little bit with the chin. That one, it has less sunlight on it, so it doesn't have as much sparkle on it. A little bit of shadow underneath there, just a tiny bit. And then just kind of, this is more to, there's a little bit of darks underneath there, but it's really to give the shape and round the head out a bit. So, and that looks very extreme, but trust me, it's going to dry a lot lighter than you have it. It's still going to need one more layer at least on all of those darks. Even though they seem very contrasty right now, very dense dark, it gets darker, trust me. Much more vibrant to build it up in layers. So this is just tinges with the cobalt blue and the quinacridone rust. These are the cutest little birds too. I love seeing them. I pretty much love all of them. So a little bit of contrast on the feathers there from the underneath the shadow. And very ball like a little feather ball right around the joint when it's crouched down like that. This is mostly quinacridone rust. I like to blur the lines a little bit. They really don't have too many harsh edges. It looks like the lines between the black and the white, and the wings and the chest are very, very contrasting colors. But when you really look at them, it's virtually the same colors. It's something about how the light hits them. So just building up the feet, adding a bit more blue, just some bright cobalt for the feathers there. And just a couple dashed lines, just keep that very loose. And see how that's starting to develop more depth in just a couple layers. Really notice where the lights and the darks are. And yes, there's a reference photo on my website, so don't worry about that. Tiny tinge of nickel azo yellow just to brighten it up a bit. That's tricky with the blue. Don't do it too much or it'll turn green. And, while there are green birds, my parrot is green, but not chickadees. Quin rust to dull that down. And then a bit of a mix. Now I'm going to feather those edges of the feathers. And just dulling down that contrast and rounding the cheeks. They're very tiny. If you think of it as kind of a ball that's merged in with the rest of it. All right, so I've painted some water on there and then I pulled it out with my rag. And remember, the undercolor was the cobalt blue, so I get those nice blue highlights. and just a tiny bit more detail right around the eye and just a couple places. It doesn't take much. Now that is for texture, so a little bit of dry brush for texture. And now I'm starting to fuss a little bit. But you know, I really do enjoy that stage. And just a couple lines in the right direction of the feathers makes all the difference. I mean, all along I was painting with the shapes of the object that I'm painting, but the finishing touches on that makes a lot of difference. Blurring that edge a bit more than the water drop gave me. And see how that shapes the head a bit more. Don't be afraid to play with the paint. That's what sketchbooks are for. Just to play and have fun with it. Now, when you have that deep, strong, dark, pulling it out is a fabulous technique for something like the eye shine. See? But you have to have a deep, strong, dark for it to show up at all. And it's just Chickadee because I didn't remember Carolina or Black-capped. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it inspires you to paint some cute little chickadees in your own backyard. I really enjoy sketching birds, and I will show you the other tufted titmouse and a couple other birds from my backyard over the next couple months. If you have any questions, please visit my website, paintingwatercolor.com. I have a lesson there and reference photos. And thank you so much for watching, and thank you for commenting on the previous video because that inspires me to paint what y'all want. Happy painting!